Hurricane Francis, a massive storm, high winds, floods, finally hitting Florida, but it's only the beginning. Terror's toll, the sorrow, relief, and rage as the death toll now reaches more than 300 in Russia. Decision 2004, the big bounce. Good news for President Bush as he gets a boost from the convention. And heart monitor, while former President Clinton awaits surgery, questions now about what heart tests can and cannot show.
This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams in Vero Beach, Florida, and John Seigenthaler in New York.
And good evening from Vero Beach, Florida tonight, where the onslaught of Hurricane Francis is now underway, and along miles of coastline, that right now means howling winds and horizontal rain from this enormous storm, which has confounded forecasters and caused over 2 million people to get out of its way. Tonight, hurricane warnings are posted along 300 miles of Florida coastline. Hundreds of thousands are already without power. As we look at the storm's current position and size on radar, it's not as strong or as fast as it once was. It's moving at a crawl, and that's the bad news, in fact, because of the amount of rain it is carrying and will now discharge over the state of Florida. We have correspondents fanned out all along the path of Hurricane Francis here tonight, and we'll begin with NBC's Robert Hager in Vero Beach. Bob, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Well, it's blowing 105 miles an hour at the center. That's 50 miles off the coast now, so 50 miles away from us. As you say, it's stationary, but it's expected to resume its movement again, and it could strengthen some before it comes ashore, either sometime before midnight or in the early hours of the morning after midnight. And the landfall is expected now someplace between Palm Beach and Cape Canaveral. But it's already been blowing hard here for more than 12 hours. This is what it looked like here today. The raw power of nature on display. Up to 20 inches of rain expected in some places. A storm surge up from 3 to 5 feet. Boats were torn from their moorings or swamped in the surf. An awning careened down a street. Power lines snapped and trees came down. But after the largest evacuation in Florida history, there were only a few who stayed to ride it out.
I'm scared. I don't mind telling you. I'm scared to death.
We're in a concrete structure. We're boarded up. We got plenty of water and food.
But some hadn't counted on the duration of the punishment. Hour after hour, the waves pounded the coastline, sea level rising higher and higher from the surge, and the wind driving against the coastline, picking up grains of sand, stinging the skin. Travel by air and rail came to a halt. Orlando's famous theme parks closed, and the worst could still be ahead. Florida Governor Jeb Bush.
Francis is still as we know, a big, unpredictable, and very slow storm.
NBC's Al Roker.
It's a huge eye of this storm. Right now, about 80 to 70 miles wide. So that's going to take about 5 or 6 hours just to clear Florida itself, come across the coastline, and then the backside of the hurricane comes in and whips the coast as well.
In Melbourne, 130 elderly refugees from a vulnerable neighborhood called Barefoot Bay found shelter in this motel. But most, like Helen Searing, worried about what they'd left behind.
My neighbor across the street, they were taking pictures of the house and so forth, and then he said, there's not going to be any Barefoot Bay.
Already at the first squalls, there was damage in her neighborhood. But it was Governor Bush who put his finger on it. This hurricane is unpredictable, as Florida waits now for landfall on what promises to be a very long night. Brian?
Robert Hager here in Vero Beach tonight. Thanks. With over 2 million people evacuated and tens of thousands riding out the storm in shelters, it could be days before the people here find out whether everything they have worked for all of their lives has survived this. NBC's Mark Potter is in West Palm Beach tonight.
A last-ditch run for safety at the Red Cross shelter at Palm Beach Central High as Hurricane Francis bears down. A school closed to students because of the storm, now a makeshift village for evacuees from all walks of life. 4,000 people crowded together, sleeping in hallways and classrooms on blankets and mattresses brought from home.
Would you go to the second table?
They all come together for meals in the school cafeteria, all linked by a common fear of what they could lose to the storm.
There we go.
Pamela Chapman, disabled, left her mobile home. She hopes it's still there when she returns.
Being handicapped, being homeless means we have nowhere to go. We sleep in a car.
The Ospina family, immigrants from Colombia, had just moved into a new mobile home the day before they were ordered to evacuate.
They have strong winds.
Today, home is a classroom used to teach algebra and geometry. The Ospinas also fear losing their house.
We are very sad about that. I think we are going to lose everything. I'm thinking about that.
With the air conditioning off and fear and frustration building, tempers flared in one of the hallways. Police stepped in to separate two of the families. With the storm moving so slowly, people trying to make do will now have to spend even more time here than they expected.
Hurricane Francis, a Category 2 hurricane.
Tonight, as the hurricane swirls outside, there is nothing to do here but to wait and to worry about what they will find when Francis finally moves on. Mark Potter, NBC News, West Palm Beach, Florida.
Because of how slowly Francis is moving, for much of this day, it has been hitting the Bahamas and Florida hard. And at the very same time, NBC's Peter Alexander has been covering the storm from the Bahamas and has our report from there tonight.
Hurricane Francis battering the Bahamas for 26 straight hours. Still not done. Massive flooding, 10-foot storm surges, the biggest problem, houses up to their windows in water, and unrelenting winds up to 105 miles an hour, knocking out power to Grand Bahama Island's nearly 50,000 residents. Now, with Bahamians bracing for a second night, one emergency manager already calls this the worst hurricane ever to hit the 700-island chain.
Cars are in the middle of the road. You have trees in the middle of the road, houses underwater.
This morning, a nerve-wracking calm settled over Freeport as the hurricane's eye moved through. The break gave time for a damage assessment and a brief window to evacuate 600 residents stranded by swelling seas in a makeshift rescue. On jet skis and by boat, heavy construction truck drivers like Gordon Roll hauled in to help.
I'm hauling human cargo.
We didn't expect it to be this bad. We never had it like this before.
Clyde Grant and 4 generations of his family finally gave in to the full force of Francis just before dawn.
I didn't want to leave at first, but when I saw the water, I think it was best to leave.
The eye of the storm has just passed us here in Freeport. The rescuers are now leaving to rescue themselves. The waters they fear will return to waist level.
Within the hour, Francis's wrath returned. Tonight, residents feel like it will never end. Peter Alexander, NBC News, Freeport, Bahamas.
Now, as to where this storm may be heading next, the current guidance is that it will make landfall along the middle of Florida's coastline, again, late tonight or early tomorrow, and then make its way across Florida and into the state of Alabama, where it finally will amount to a tropical rainstorm. And a reminder, you can track the path of Hurricane Francis minute by minute on our website, msnbc.com. We will have more from the hurricane zone here on the Florida coast a bit later on, including an update on this storm. But now we want to go to my colleague John Seigenthaler in New York with some of the rest of the day's news. John, good evening.
Brian, good evening to you. And we turn now to the tragic events of the past 24 hours in Russia. President Vladimir Putin said today that terrorists have launched an all-out war in his country. He was reacting to the hostage standoff at a school where 340 people were killed, most of them children, and 550 others were injured, making this the second largest terrorist attack ever after September 11th. It happened in the small town of Beslan, where today emotions were overflowing. We have 2 reports, beginning with NBC's Jim Maceda.
Throughout the day, screams of grief from mothers who learned their children were killed. As families sought comfort in makeshift lists of survivors, the number of dead rose to well over 300. Zaryeta Kargieva could find neither her daughter-in-law or her grandson among some 1,100 taken hostage by Islamic militants on Wednesday. I'm angry with the government. They give us no protection, she says. Yet around 12:50 p.m. on Friday, negotiations seem to have reached a breakthrough. The militants agreed to allow ambulances into the schoolyard to collect the bodies of 15 victims killed in the initial assault. But at 1:15, as the ambulances approach, negotiator Leonid Roshal hears 2 explosions from inside the building. These explosions were set off by the terrorists, he says. The roof collapsed and the hostages made a run for it, shot at from behind. The cause of the blasts remains unclear. One report suggests that booby traps taped to the ceiling came unglued and detonated on impact. Around 1:30 p.m., a commando unit called Alpha moves in, but there is no real plan of attack. 18 Alpha troops are wounded by gunfire. 14-year-old hostage Azamat also moves. He and his pal jump through a gym window, and he cuts his hand seeking cover in a school office. We were waiting for the troops to storm the school, he says. We prayed it would happen, and we knew the terrorists would kill us if it didn't. These boys incredibly lucky. Almost every hostage was killed or wounded in the crossfire. And there were other errors. Russian forces failed to establish a secure cordon around the school. Some militants escaped. Many armed civilians broke through, too, adding to the chaos. Shortly after 2 p.m., Russian commanders say they're in control, but the siege doesn't end until 10 p.m. Today, a local church service for the Beslan victims and the first visit by some families to the gym where so many died. But for now, the school remains off limits for those still looking for loved ones as the search goes on for bodies and for explosives left by the militants. People in shock, hoping for a miracle and asking how it all went so wrong. Jim Masada, NBC News, Beslan, Russia.
This is Donna Friesen in Moscow. No headlines were needed in Russian newspapers today. The photos told the story. People here trying to comprehend the carnage, fearing for the future.
This can happen here in Moscow too, and for example, in my school or in my university.
Russian TV carried only parts of the drama live, but what people saw shocked and enraged them. There was no planning, this man says. The security forces looked so unprepared. It was a botched operation. Tonight, in an address to the nation, President Putin made a surprising admission. We showed weakness, he said, and the weak are beaten. He said security must be improved in the face of what he called international terrorism. Putin was elected on the promise he'd make Russia strong and secure. The terror attacks are increasing. More than 400 people killed in the last 10 days alone. At the school, the bombing of 2 planes, and outside a Moscow subway.
If we see continuing actions of terrorism, continuing acts like what we saw today, then his popularity will probably go down, and he might even put his whole political future into jeopardy.
Chechnya is his biggest problem. A mostly Muslim region, Russian troops have brutally suppressed its decade-long fight for independence.
Human rights groups get almost daily reports of Russian troops engaged in executions and other abuses. But most of it goes on unseen because Putin has such tight control of state television. He portrays his fight with Chechen terrorists as part of the global war on terror. But its roots are very much homegrown.
It has spawned the so-called Black Widows, Chechen women who lost husbands and turned to suicide bombing, motivated as much by personal revenge as political strategy.
We're talking about really very, very damaged people who possibly don't really understand even Islam, but just want to blow themselves up and to take as many Russians with them.
The school siege, brutal evidence Russian forces can do little to stop them. Donna Friesen, NBC News, Moscow.
Iraq Watch tonight. 20 people were killed when a suicide attacker detonated a car bomb outside the Iraqi police academy in the northern city of Kirkuk. 36 others were wounded. Also in southern Iraq, insurgents blew up an oil pipeline. Firefighters are struggling to put out the blaze caused by the explosion, and for now this pipeline remains shut down. Up next on NBC Nightly News, more evidence of a bounce for President Bush out of the GOP convention as both campaigns return to familiar territory this holiday weekend. And later, as former President Bill Clinton faces serious heart surgery, the questions continue. Shouldn't regular checkups have found his heart disease before now? NBC News in depth tonight, Decision 2004. On the heels of the Republican National Convention in New York, a bounce for President Bush. A new poll out tonight shows the president with a growing lead over Senator John Kerry. With 2 months left before voters head to the polls, both candidates are focusing on the key states that could decide this election. Here's NBC's David Gregory.
The campaign trail merged once again in battleground Ohio today.
Are you ready for new leadership for this country?
With both candidates barnstorming through mostly Democratic strongholds of the state.
For 4 more years, Dick Cheney and I'll make this country safer, stronger, and better.
2 days after the GOP convention, there are new signs of momentum for the Bush campaign. A Newsweek magazine poll conducted Thursday and Friday shows Bush with an 11-point lead over Kerry and an approval rating up to 52%.
Coming out of his convention, President Bush has the advantage. He's able to play a little more offense.
The president shrugged off the new numbers, saying there's still a lot of work to do, but the campaign did little to hide its new confidence along the bus route today, where at one point even the Bush daughters posed for pictures. Mr. Bush has emerged from his convention hoping to sell undecided voters on sweeping reform proposals, like overhauling the tax code, saying today he will even consider a flat tax proposal.
What I'm in favor of is changing the tax code to make it easier to understand and more simple.
Still firing back at the Bush campaign after the Republican convention, today Senator Kerry tried to offer a reality check on the economy in a state reeling from the loss of manufacturing jobs. Kerry said yesterday's report of 144,000 new jobs in August fell well short of administration promises.
Yesterday, this President of the United States became the first president since the Great Depression to be absolutely certain on Election Day to have not created one single new job.
Inside 2 months until Election Day, this race has hit a critical phase, with both campaigns now plotting where their money and candidates' time will make the most difference. David Gregory, NBC News, with the president in Erie, Pennsylvania.
And next here on NBC Nightly News, how did President Clinton ace his stress tests and end up needing serious heart surgery? Tonight, what these tests do and do not tell your doctor. Former President Bill Clinton remains hospitalized tonight in New York, where officials say he's been receiving thousands of get well messages. After suffering chest pains on Friday, Mr. Clinton is scheduled to undergo bypass surgery because of blocked arteries. NBC's chief science correspondent Robert Bazell reports.
Mr. Clinton is in cheerful spirits awaiting his surgery, as he reported in a phone call last night to Larry King.
We thank you, President, for joining us.
Let me just say this. Republicans aren't the only people that want 4 more years here.
Experts say bypass surgery should give him a lot more than 4 more years.
But many people are asking, how could a former president who gets regular checkups end up so suddenly with heart disease? Clinton bragged last night that he had aced his stress tests for 4 or 5 years in a row.
But experts say these tests, which can be useful, often miss serious disease.
A negative stress test does not make you immune from having a heart attack or even from having sudden cardiac death. I wish we had better techniques for picking those individuals out before the event occurs, but we simply don't have the means to do so yet.
The best test to find blocked arteries to the heart is the angiogram Clinton had yesterday. But that involves putting a tube into the heart arteries, so it carries some risk.
You're going to have a series of breath holds.
Doctors are looking at a type of X-ray called fast CT scan. But most experts say it is not yet reliable, and it subjects the patient to huge doses of radiation. The best chance, they say, to stop heart disease is to cut the risk factors, smoking, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and diabetes, long before the disease strikes. And there are questions whether Clinton's doctors did a good enough job.
We are told that he had an LDL cholesterol, a bad cholesterol, of 177 in 2001, and that he temporarily took a statin drug, a cholesterol-lowering drug, but didn't stay on it. That's a missed opportunity.
Nowadays, many doctors advise that people get their bad cholesterol below 100 and keep it down with statin drugs if necessary for life. Robert Bazell, NBC News, New York.
On this busy travel weekend, 4 terminals were shut down for about 3 hours today at Los Angeles International Airport after separate security scares just half an hour apart. One incident involved a passenger who bypassed a security checkpoint running up a down escalator. In the other incident, a flashlight battery exploded in luggage that was being hand-searched by a security screener. Next, back to Brian Williams on the Florida coast, already feeling the strength and power of Hurricane Francis.
And we're back in Vero Beach, Florida tonight with an update on Hurricane Francis at this hour. Here is a live look at the storm, which tonight is all but stalled about 50 miles due east of this very coastline. The winds close to 100 miles an hour are relentless, and the rain is torrential. And a word about how people are keeping up with this storm in this land of battery-operated TVs and weather radios at the ready. All through this crisis for Florida, the lifeline for so many people in this state has been local news. So many TV stations up and down the state have set aside normal programming for now. It is urgent stuff, and it is the essence of television news. It's playing out 24 hours a day until this storm finally clears this state. That is NBC Nightly News for this Saturday. Stay with this NBC station and MSNBC for the very latest tonight on Hurricane Francis. We'll have more tomorrow morning, of course, on Today. I'll be reporting again from Florida tomorrow evening. I'm Brian Williams, NBC News, reporting tonight.